Welcome to the klutchkittengaming podcast, where I play an indie game for 5 hours and let you know whether or not it's worth your time and money. Hello and welcome everyone, this is James Moeller, also known as Clutch Kitten, and I am so glad that you're here for episode 73 of the show. Like I mentioned last week, the podcast name change is imminent, so to bring us one step closer, I want to share what the name will be. Next week will be the first episode released under the title of Indie Slice. It will definitely take some time to acclimate to the new name, but given that the content won't be changing, I think it will be a smooth transition. With that being said, let's get into this week's review. Today we're going to be looking at Creature in the Well, which is described as a pinball-inspired hack-and-slash dungeon crawler developed by Flight School Studio. If you haven't heard of Flight School before, it's because they're pretty new to the scene. They were founded in Texas in 2017, and since opening, they've already released 3 games: Manifest 99, Island Time VR, and of course, Creature in the Well. Creature in the Well was released for $14.99 on September 6th of 2019 for PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch, and according to howlongtobeat.com, it takes around 4 to 6 hours to complete. Let's transition now to the narrative. I've asked the engineers to log their encounters with the creature in the darkness, and the data coming back is hundreds of pages of conversation. They are talking to it. There just isn't time to read all of this and finish the work that remains. Creature in the Well begins in a similar way to Frostpunk. Shit has already hit the fan, and it's up to you to make things right. You're in a world stricken by an eternal sandstorm because the machine built to fix the weather isn't working. What's even worse is the reason for the machine being down. A mysterious creature from the depths dismantled an entire fleet of robots which had been designed to keep the machine running. Somehow you escaped the massacre, but there's nothing for you elsewhere. You're the last humanoid Botsy robot, and there's only one thing left for you to do: face the creature in the well. You're alone, but you were created for this challenge. Creature in the Well doesn't tell a particularly innovative story, but the tone of the game effectively makes the world feel special. There's a strong sense of loneliness, oppression, and defeat in the beginning. Your brothers and sisters are gone, the townsfolk hate you, and the creature that destroyed your kind is one of the few beings willing to speak with you. It's not an uplifting start, but it is compelling. In regards to narrative development, I was pleasantly surprised with what Flight School incorporated. What I read at the outset of this section was directly pulled from a log you can read in-game. After defeating each boss encounter, you can read more of those logs, which give additional depth and life to the story. What I appreciate about the writing is that it conveys more than facts. Each log is emotionally charged with anxiety, fear, worry, and confusion, and it's those feelings which create a sense of mystery and intrigue. In a similar way to Far Lone Sails, what makes this narrative captivating is the palpable sense of loneliness. My guess is that most of us don't want to undergo apocalyptic isolation in real life, but there's something bewitching about experiencing it in a game. Let's shift our focus now to the gameplay. When I started this game after hearing the description, I had no idea what to expect. We've seen other pinball-inspired games before, most notably Yoku's Island Express, but this game goes a step further into the abstract. At its core, the top-down dungeon crawler format is familiar. There are a total of 8 dungeons, each of which concludes in a fight with the creature and with your character restoring power to the zone. Where the game begins to look different is in the way you work through rooms of the dungeon. Instead of fighting hordes of enemies or searching for a key, all you have to do is pay an energy cost to open the door. The way you generate energy is through interacting with pinball-style puzzles. In its simplest form, you hit a ball at a bumper, and instead of classic pinball where you generate points, each hit earns you energy. Before we get any further, let's discuss how you interact with puzzles. Your Botsy character can do 3 main things apart from standard movement. You can dash, you can hit balls with your primary weapon, and you can absorb and charge up balls with your secondary weapon. Despite having a limited set of skills, Flight School did an excellent job of creating interesting puzzles to interact with. Each dungeon focuses on a particular skill and ramps up the difficulty as you progress. For example, one dungeon tests your skills of timing by incorporating bumpers that return fire with flaming balls. And yes, I know it's funny to say flaming balls, but literally, if your character gets hit, it takes a chunk of your health pool. That dungeon culminates with an intense fight with the creature. What starts out as a passive pinball game turns into a bullet hell-like experience requiring you to absorb attacks, charge balls for greater damage, dodge laser beams, and so much more. In a similar way, each of the other dungeons tests a new skill by implementing fresh environmental puzzles. Since I've now given you a bunch of details without much critical comment, let's round our gameplay discussion with some strengths and weaknesses. The first gameplay strength is puzzle design. For a game with no direct combat, puzzles get intense. They make full use of your abilities, and the way each dungeon hones in on a specific mechanic is satisfying. Second, I love how well the mechanics reinforce the narrative. The lack of enemies and the reoccurring fight with the creature deepens the feeling of isolation and leaves room for the narrative to breathe. Third, I have to commend the studio for creating such a novel spin on the dungeon crawler genre. Although it's not without its faults, it is an admirable proof of concept. When it comes to gameplay weaknesses, the first has to do with filler content. As you work your way through dungeons, there are branching rooms you can visit. Some of them contain uber-hard puzzles to unlock collectibles, which I'm all for, but others just contain puzzle repeats. For obvious reasons, those rooms are a waste of time. Second, when you die, you're sent all the way back to town. Thankfully, you maintain all the progress you made in the dungeon, but you still have to walk back to where you were. Again, this is another design choice that caused me to waste my time. A quick respawn mechanic would have felt so much better and would have made punishing puzzles feel much more doable. Speaking of which, the third gameplay weakness is that some of the puzzles are straight up tedious. Generally, the feeling of tedium came as a result of a puzzle being too reliant on RNG, but in the case of one specific boss fight, I nearly stopped playing the game because I couldn't find a way to win. I did end up beating it later, but man, that fight was a pain in the ass. Now that we've discussed the narrative and gameplay, let's touch on the art and sound design. On the art side, Creature in the Well is stunning. It uses a graphic art style with deep blacks, high contrast, and aesthetic environments. Animations are smooth, dungeons are visually distinct, and from the first moment you see this game, it's easy to get sucked in. In terms of the sound design, the score is filled with quiet, ambient sounds which provide exactly what the game needs. It adds to the sense of silence and isolation, it highlights the eerie noises of the creature, and it lets the sound effects be the stars of the game. Let's summarize now with some positives and negatives. First off, on the positive side, Creature in the Well has a compelling compelling atmosphere that motivates further exploration. Second, the gameplay is innovative and a strong support to the narrative. Third, the graphic art style is stunning. First off, on the negative side, the choices to include filler puzzles and a poor death spawn location were detrimental to the overall experience. Second, a few of the puzzles were difficult in an unfun and tedious way. We've made it now to the final boss. This is the part of the podcast where I let you know whether you should slay the game and buy it, flee the game and avoid it, or farm up and wait for a sale. My verdict for Creature in the Well is to farm up and wait for a sale. If it weren't for those gameplay weaknesses, this would absolutely be a game to slay. But despite those issues, the quality of world building, the mechanical innovation, and the gorgeous artwork still make their case for your time and money. I wouldn't rush to get this game, but it's still not one to overlook. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to listen in. Make sure you keep an eye out for the new podcast name next week, and in the meantime, I hope you have a lovely quarantine, and I'll see you in-game.